few minutes here, a few minutes. I give it, feedback. All right. Hey, what's up, Tommy? We give it about 2 or 3 minutes to get started here. Let a few more people trickle in. What up, baby? How's it going, man? First and foremost, I want to thank Connect Tribe for hosting me again. I think this is the third class I've done with you guys. So thank you for that. Also, fourth class? I don't know. Who's counting? But I want to say big ups to Connect Tribe. This is their 2-year anniversary party. So happy anniversary, Connect Tribe. I think you guys are doing a great thing for the community, and really appreciate everybody. So thank you, Annie. Thank you, Steph. Thank you, Zach, and Carl. Allison. I like calling her Carl though. So yeah, and to many more. Big ups. Thank you guys. Little mic. All right. So I'll go ahead and get started. So the title of this class is So You Want to Be a 3-Deck Wizard. And I got that name from Carl Cox. I'm pretty sure most people know who Carl Cox is. He's one of the originators of just the DJ scene in general. I actually started DJing like funky music, that he got from his parents. His parents are from Barbados, and he's from the UK, so, they brought like a big cross-reference of music. So he wasn't, he didn't get started with house music. He got started with like R&B and, old school funky stuff and just playing on one deck, and eventually it evolved to playing the 2 decks. And I doubt he was the first person to play 3 decks or, multiple decks. So what? No, I mean, who knows whether he was the first, but he was really the first pioneer. He was the first person to do it in front of enough people and do it well enough for it to make a difference. So, I mean, I guess number one thing is, you don't have to be the first person to do something, but, if you're going to do something, do it well and do something that makes an impact. And I think that's really what using multiple decks or even, I want to kind of get away from the deck situation and just think about like sound sources, right? Using multiple sound sources to add different energy into what you're doing in the set. Like for instance, if you're DJing on something like this that has, 3 or 4 different inputs, you can use the aux for something. You can use it for a drum machine. You can use it even for hooking up your phone for Spotify, or if you just have some drum loop somewhere. So it doesn't have to necessarily be 3 or 4 decks. It's just more so thinking of how can I add more energy into my set. And for me personally, that's what I use multiple decks for. And so, yeah, I'll go ahead and get started. So I'll go ahead and get a track playing on, well, I guess let's think more about the mechanics of it, right? You're gonna need obviously a mixer that's gonna allow you to pull in more than just 2 channels. So if you're using like a standalone, which a lot of people have, if you're using like an XDJ that only has 2 channels, you might be able to use the auxiliary channel for a 3rd source. Something to consider there is you probably won't be able to beat match it, like automatically. You might not be able to read the BPM. You might not be able to really get a solid EQ on it. So that's something to consider. If you don't have a solid 4-channel mixer where you can read your levels and you can EQ everything, then you're basically going to have a solid signal coming in, and you won't really be able to do the things necessary to really transfer the energy. So, for me, I had to start with 3 or 4 decks in the clubs because I didn't have access to a 4-channel mixer or 4-channel controller, and I didn't have the additional decks to pull in what I need to pull in. So if you ever do have a chance to play with additional decks in the club, I would say don't be afraid to do it. Because if you can't do it at home, and if you can't do it at a friend's house or something, you should really just maybe take a chance, even if it's just once or twice in a set. Just throw on an extra track and see if you can maybe mix that track in. Just to get used to trying to control multiple decks at once. But in this case right here, we have the XDJ. XZ, great controller. Um, a lot of people don't like it because just standalone, you can't do four independent decks. You have to use it. You have to use Rekordbox on the computer, 3 and 4. However, I love it because for like a small collective, if you have this, then you can always maybe borrow an additional XVJ. You can borrow additional player. You can borrow XVJ, a CDJ, whatever. Hook it up to the additional inputs in the back. You can also hook up record players, or you can hook up drum machines. You can hook up other devices as well. It doesn't just have to be a CDJ or XVJ. But the beauty of hooking up additional Pioneer gear with this is it does link directly. So you just get a not a USB. You get a like a Cat5 cable, just get an Ethernet cable running the channel 3 and 4, and it reads everything, just like you would be connecting 4 CDJs. So right now we have the XDJ XZ, and then we have one XDJ 1000. And so this is basically like a CDJ, a little bit watered down and cheaper, but essentially works the same as a CDJ. So for me, basically when I'm mixing on 3 or 4 channels, I'm really only mixing 2 songs at a time. I'm not actually mixing 3 or 4 songs and trying to make them all blend because that's a lot of work and it can get confusing. You have to really know your songs if you're going to do that. But what I'm really doing is I'm using that additional third or fourth deck, sometimes just like as a visual cue. So especially if you're using an XDJ, one thing about this, it has the one screen. And so if you're playing on, let's say, channel 1, that song's going to be playing, and you have to, go into the link, or you have to go into the USB, and then you have to find your next track. Now you can still see what's going on here because you kind of have this visual cue down here. It'll tell you where you are on the track and everything, but you're still kind of, visually, you're kind of missing out on what's going on, and you're searching at the same time for your next track. So having a third deck will allow you to, let me just get a track playing here. I'm just gonna put a filter on so there's not so much bass in it. Put a filter on. So, all right. So right now I have a loop going, and I just have a little bit of a filter on it, so it's not so much bass going, so you guys can still hear me. Right, so now I got this track playing, and instead of me having to, browsing here and then also trying to figure out visually where I am on deck 1, I can go over to deck 3 and just search. So that's kind of the lowest hanging fruit for me, is just the ability to be able to manage what's going on the decks that are playing. So I can always come back and say, oh, I need to, add a filter here, or I can turn that off, or whatever's going on. But I still have the ability to search for my next track. So now I'm kind of getting ahead of the game, and I'm preparing for my next track while this one still has 5 minutes to go. If I do that on 4 different CDJs, I can have track 1, 2, 3, 4 lined up. So I can have 2 tracks playing that are mixing, and the third track, I'm queuing up, and then I can say, oh wait, I actually don't like that track. I can quickly go in here instead of having to be on the same CDJ and operate that way. And even if you search here and you say, okay, that's the track I want to play, let's say Deep in Your Heart, but what if I want to play it on deck 2? I don't have to load it on here. I could just search here, go to key, and load up the next track where I want to play. A lot of times I'll do that. So I'll use deck 3 or deck 4 to find the track that I want to play, but I'll play it on the deck that I actually want to play it on. So I'm just using this kind of like as a reference. So sometimes the third deck can just be there just for you to be able to search for your tracks. So let me go ahead and get this going. I'll go ahead and just mix in another track here. Any questions so far? If anybody has any questions while I'm going, feel free to ask. All right, so I did load up the track that I said I was going to play next. It's called Deep in Your Heart. So I'll start bringing that one up. So another reason to use three decks, I mean, for me, the most important reason is energy, right? And that's the main reason that club DJs, especially like in tech house and tech, um, the main reason they use three decks is energy level. Because with three or four decks, right now this is one deck, right now this is two decks. You can hear the difference just in the drums. So really it's not about mixing three songs at a time. I mean, when Carl Cox was doing it, that's kind of what he was doing. But nowadays, people are using it more so to maintain an energy level, right? When you hear this is a big dropout. It can maybe not empty a dance floor, but when you have a big drop like that, you have to really be patient. And it may make you feel a little awkward too. When there's a big drop and all the drums come out, you'll see people stop dancing and a lot of people panic and they'll set a loop in the middle of like the drop or like the breakout. And, then they'll try to bring in the next track because they don't want to lose the crowd, which in my opinion is a big no-no. But I understand why people do that because it creates a, go ahead.
Can you elaborate on why it's a big no-no?
Yeah, for me, number one reason that's a big no-no is because, these producers, they made these tracks to do certain things. So they make the track sort of fall off a cliff so that it could come back up and then it could create a big drop. So if you let it fall off the cliff, but you don't let it come back up, then you're automatically negating the energy that was built into the track in the first place.
So do you mean like for example, if you only have two decks, right, and they went to a drop, and then you put something on loop and you slowly bring it in, is that what you're saying you shouldn't do? Or?
May I grab that word?
Sure, go ahead.
So what Kim was saying is just like when the drop comes and all of a sudden the drums are gone.
Yeah.
So you'll panic,
Right.
throw the track that's currently in the drop, in a loop, and bring in the next track. And that means you're missing out.
Okay.
That means you're missing out on the whole entire build-up, crescendo of the track that you were playing in the first
Right.
place.
I thought you were
Right?
saying kind of
Because-
trap.
Oh.
Yeah.
No. So one of the points to that point, right? So let me I'm gonna go back on this track. Right, so right about here, all the main drums are going from here. There's like some weird percussive, kind of like percussive sound. You still have the vocals in there. But a lot of times people will just kind of set a loop in here. They'll set a loop like right in the middle there, and they'll be like kind of on the vocal, and then they'll try to bring in the next track. And I get why, because it's like you're kind of, it's almost like an impatience thing, where you don't want to lose the crowd and you want to keep the energy in. But the way that the person made the song, if you like the song anyway, they made it so that it does that, so it creates some suspense. So part of having multiple decks, not just two, but having three decks, is you can always kind of have a baseline drum loop going in the background, so that when that track does come down, there still is another drum loop that's playing in the background. Even if it's faint, even if the filter is on, there's still a baseline of energy. So instead of going from top, and then you drop, and then you kind of get really nervous because the energy falls, you go from top to middle, and then there's a baseline drum loop, there's some hi-hats going, there's some energy there, so people still feel that the energy that you had, it didn't leave all the way, it's still there, it's just, maybe not with a big kick drum going, but there is a sort of baseline energy, and so a lot of times that's what that third deck is there for. It's there for just keeping a drum loop that you find in one of your tracks that you really like. Might be at the beginning of the track or the end of the track, that's when you have kind of the stripped down version of the track. So you might have just a simple kick drum, you have, the clap, kind of like the boots and cats part, you just have the boots and cats. You don't have the vocals going, you don't have the bass line going, you don't have all these weird effects going. You just have just a straight drum loop, which is really all this music is. So having that third or fourth deck on the drum loop is going to give you the ability to just manage energy levels. So you make sure that your energy never goes from 100 down to 2, and then you gotta come back to 100. Instead, it'll go from 100 maybe to a 55, and then you can ride that, and you can bounce that back and forth. And then also, additional decks going, you can always add in other effects in the middle of a break, or you can like add interesting type things on that additional deck that'll kind of give it a little bit more spice while your other track is playing. That's assuming that you know how to loop properly. One thing that I find kind of annoying personally is like if people loop in a place that, like you'll hear this, right? Right, so not to say that that's a bad thing, but if you're looping on a vocal part, that it just sounds the same, you have to really like be careful of that because it's gonna really like work everybody's ear, so it's already starting to annoy me, I'm sort of starting to annoy you guys, right? It's like, okay, get to the point. One key to looping is understanding phrasing, so this is for a different lesson, but basically phrasing is understanding that music is made up of certain chunks, usually like in 4s or 8s or 16s or whatever. And so if you loop on, let's say the first part of the chunk is a big crash, you're gonna have a crash every time that loop happens, which is gonna really start to annoy people. It's gonna start to irritate everyone's ears. So, if you know how to loop well, then you can set a loop on your third or fourth deck. That way, it's just like a general drum beat like this. This beat right here is very, very useful because I can filter it. You can just use the highs right there. So now I still have 2 decks playing. But my second deck, which is on channel 1, really isn't doing much. It's just kind of the same loop over and over. But really it's just giving an extra layer of energy. So as I bring in this new track, the track isn't going to be super dry coming in. It already kind of has a little bit of extra energy added into it. It's kind of hard to like manage both of them. But yeah, another purpose for a third deck, which personally I don't use. I don't know how many of you use it. How many use like additional decks for like acapellas or something like that? That's a really good use for an additional deck. So if you find a good acapella, as long as you have it sort of synced up to the BPM of the other tracks that you have going, that's a good way to add an additional layer to what you're doing. So, it could be like a funky acapella, it could be just something you like ripped off the internet, something funny, whatever it is. But that's another way that you can kind of make the set your own, is basically by finding a vocal with no instrumentals on it and just layering that on top of all your other instrumental tracks. So a lot of people use that famous house acapella, but you can use like a newer song. It's like you're creating your own remix on the fly. So if you have a track playing that's mostly, instrumentals, and then you have like a drum loop, and you have a acapella going, now you kind of have something that's like an amalgamation of like all these different things. And again, that's just going to help you with energy level because you're hitting people with, a vocal, which, we recognize vocals better than we recognize instrumentals. So if you're just playing all instrumental tracks, you might lose people. If you throw in the vocal, that'll be good. But sometimes if you throw it like with this song, right, this vocal, it just kind of is overwhelming. So if I had an instrumental of this track and then I could just like take different parts of the vocal and put it in there, you know, I can kind of control the energy level versus just letting the vocal kind of like run the whole track. So that's another thought, something that I don't really do. I've been thinking about if I want to add more vocals. Um, you know, it's more so about finding the right vocals for you. So, um, and another huge reason for using digital decks is obviously for playing with other people, playing back to back. You know, so if you're playing on a controller with another person, it gets kind of cumbersome because everybody's trying to look at the screen. Everyone's trying to look for their songs. You know, people do keys in different ways, and you know, it kind of becomes a little bit of a fight. But if you have, you know, 4 decks, you can have one person take these 2, another person take these 2, and now you're kind of like mixing your own set. I'm gonna set a loop here once it stops getting annoying. But now you can kind of like play your own set while you're playing together. So, for instance, me and my buddy, we played at Flash on Thursday, and we both had 2 CDJs, so we could kind of do what we wanted to do. You know, we didn't have to step on each other's toes. We could both kind of play our own sets, set our own loops, bring things in as we wanted. We just had to agree who was gonna go in and kind of adjust the levels accordingly. But you know, having those additional decks playing with other people is huge. You know, it allows you to keep the energy up. It allows you not to step on each other's toes. It allows you to search on your own. It allows you to adjust the decks how you want. So, for instance, you know, I like my jog adjust right in the middle. For some reason, a lot of people like theirs on super heavy. Some people might like it on super light. Whatever it is, when you're playing on your individual decks with other people, you know, you can just kind of set things the way you want, and it makes things a lot easier. Any questions? No? Who actually uses, you know, multiple decks on a regular basis? Okay. Most people. Say what?
Do you want something to drink?
I'm good. I got it. Okay. Yeah, so maybe I'll just like kind of do an example. I don't know if somebody want to like come in and throw down a little bit with me. Sam? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be good to just kind of do an example. I'm gonna just kind of use the loops that are going now. I mean, if people who are familiar or aren't familiar want to come up and just take a look. The one thing I will say that's a sort of word of advice is, you know, when you're in the club and you have multiple decks, I would say practice with it, you know, but be extremely careful about which decks are which. Because multiple times I've been in the club, in class, in sound check, and I just stopped the deck I was playing. And just stop the music, please.
Roadblock.
Yeah.
Roadblock.
Yeah. I've had it, you know, it happens multiple times because when it's dark and you're moving fast and you're in the club and you're trying to like bring the energy, you might not be paying attention to which one is which. And you know, I have a certain way of doing things. For instance, you know, I never have low lock on. I have low lock off because if I have a loop going, I don't feel like pressing the cue or play button to stop the track. I'd rather just get a load on the deck. Now, with that in mind, if you just load on the deck that's playing, it's just gonna stop the music. You know, so, or if you hit the cue button or you accidentally hit the play button, you'll stop the music. So the one thing about playing with multiple decks is you do really need to pay attention to what deck you're on. Me personally, what I do now is I use my hands kind of as a cue. So I'm always like, okay, if I have my hand like this, I know that channel 2 is on. So I know not to fuck with channel 2. I won't touch it. I won't hit play or anything. I'll make sure that, and I know that channel 1 is down. So if I have my finger down on channel 1, then I can always load on channel 1. So just have some sort of, you know, it's kind of like good mixing procedure, I would say, just to understand which decks are live and which decks are not live, you know. But yeah, let's like just kind of get a mix going. So I'll let you take the XCJ. I don't know if you want to load up there. So again, he's loading up on this particular mixer. The way that it's numbered is kind of inside out. So you got channel 1 on the left, channel 2 on the right, and then on the outside you have 3 and 4. It seems kind of confusing, but the way they do that is because internally the mixer, again, you can only use channels 1 and 2 if you don't have record box hooked up. So, you know, if you're not using a computer and if you don't have additional sources, really you only have channel 1 and 2 on the inside. And then channel 3 and 4 will be on the outside if you hook up additional players. So right now we have the track playing on channel channel 2, and then he's loading up on the outside here, which is on channel 4. Okay, go ahead. I'm gonna turn the bass up a little bit, so I think we'll just like cut the bass if we need to talk or anything. If anybody has any questions, just feel free to raise your hand.
Cowboy motherfucker.
So another benefit of using multiple decks, right? Is when you have like a dropout, you know, maybe like a short dropout, or you have a drop coming. So right now this is a huge drop. So now you see you still have some drums going here, right? We take that out now, we just kind of lost everything. You know, there's no like drum line going, anything like that. So if we have that there, you know, it may not be exactly how we want it, but there's some energy going, right? Now, one thing about having multiple decks is, you know, you can take out energy a lot easier. So now we can bring this out.
Chicago motherfucking gangster.
And then when you have the drop happen, you can bring, you know, the additional 1 deck or 2 decks or even 3 decks back in. So some of the D-Day is about, you know, how much you can have going at one time. Some of it is about what you can take away and then just let something shine, even if it's just for 3 or 4 seconds, and then bring everything back in. And that'll bring a huge jolt of energy versus just the 1 track that has a drop. You know, now you have 3 tracks that are, you know, you have a drop and you have 3 additional tracks that are bringing in more energy. So that's a way to sort of enhance the drop is by, you know, having your second and third deck sort of in a loop and just ready to bring back up once the drop happens. you're gonna get like a big expulsion along with the drop that's already happening. So it's a good way to build energy. All right, I'll go ahead and load up another track here.
Chicago motherfucking gangster. Chicago.
Right, so this is another sort of break here,
Motherfucking gangster. Chicago.
and then I'll load up a track
Chicago
on.
motherfucking gangster. Chicago motherfucking gangster.
Another thing that I'll do, and a lot of folks do, especially a lot of DJs who use, so right now we're using Rekordbox, which is, it's a Pioneer program. But a lot of, famous techno DJs, they use Traktor. Traktor you have to use with a computer. A lot of times they'll use like special outboard gear. The thing about Traktor is it makes your loops very tight, and it just allows you to, you can do some crazy stuff with it basically. But a lot of times with Traktor, you'll see these DJs that just have like endless loops going. It might be their own loops, or it'll be like. It might be one of their own loops. It could be, it could be a number of things. But so I kind of glean from that the ability to just set like a loop at the beginning of the song. So typically I'll try to find a loop, maybe the first bar, the first two bars, or typically I use the second bar of the song, and I'll loop that because a lot of times it won't have that beginning splash. When a song starts, it'll start with like a big crash or something. Again, I don't want that big crash in a loop. So I just want like the basic drums in the loop. So a lot of times I'll set a loop on the second bar, and I'll just have that playing like infinite. As soon as I load the track, I'll just set that second bar loop, and I'll just have it going until I'm ready to release the song. And what that allow me to do is allow me to have drums going. It'll have the drums prepared. So, like I have this loop going. So again, you can hear that. So now, again, there's two tracks going here. You can feel the difference in the energy between 1 and 2. Right? It's the same thing with the third track. It's just that now with the third track, now we have an option for playing back to back. Now he can bring his energy in a separate way. Again, he can set a beginning loop or whatever he wants to do. But it just gives us that ability to just add that much more energy into our tracks. And then if I have a 4th track, I can have a separate loop going. I can have a acapella going. So it really gives you a lot more capability as a DJ. Again, you just have to be careful about the way you do it. When Carl Cox started, he was using vinyl, so there was no sync button. So he was beat matching not only 2 vinyls successfully, 3 vinyls successfully. Not only that, he could set a loop. So if there was some weird shit happening and, on the 3rd deck, what's he gonna do? He just kind of have to pull it out, or he has to ride with it. We're lucky in that we have all this technology and we can sync things up. But that still being said, you still have to A, know your tracks, and B, you have to have them analyzed correctly. A lot of times when you download tracks, they may be set at the wrong sort of key points, or the downbeat might be sort of a half beat, if you know what I'm saying. So like instead of it being on the 1, it'll be like on the half beat. And you have to adjust that in Rekordbox. Otherwise, when you get in the club, it's just gonna sound like it's off a half beat. And you're gonna have to like adjust it. You're gonna have to take seat off. You're gonna have to make sure that the quantize is on or off. So for me, the number one thing is being prepared. Not just knowing what they sound like, but knowing what they're supposed to do and knowing that they're analyzed correctly. Which means that for me, I can't just dump my tracks in Rekordbox and then don't want to use the vehicles to club. If I don't have the time to sit there and organize my tracks and make sure that everything is the way it should be so that I know what's going to happen, then I just can't play it that night. So that puts like the onus on me to really put in the work before. And there might be a track that I want to play, tonight, let's say. And I just heard it on, let me go download it real quick and put it on a USB. A lot of times when I used to do that, I would fuck up because the track would be analyzed incorrectly, and it would take more time to try to figure out how to get it to work than it would just like picking another track that I already know that works. You know, so if you are going to use multiple decks and use looping and all that, you know, just really be prepared with your tracks. And if you're prepared with your tracks, then you won't have to really worry about weird stuff happening. But you know, if you just put tracks in a crate and go to the club and start playing them, then be prepared to like work extra hard. You know, and that's not really worth it. You know, you can use old tracks. See, and I still have the same loop going from the deep in your heart. So, you know, you can't really tell what that is. Right? That's just a drum at the end of the day. I'm using this more as a DJ tool than a song at this point. This is just a drum loop. You know, there's lots of things you can do with it. You can open it back up full range if I wanted to. I can totally cut it out. You know, I can put an effect on it. But it's the same song that I played at the beginning. It's just, you know, it's 30 minutes later. It's just a drum loop. But yeah, knowing your tracks, knowing what they're going to do, knowing how they're analyzed correctly is going to really help you a lot at the end of the day. You want to make another one? Okay. Anybody else want to come up here and show a track?
You want to talk about breaking down?
Huh? No, I don't. But I know a lot of people do though. So Elvis asked, which was a good point, and it's something that I don't think I'm going to get into today. Because I mean, each one of these things could be their own lesson, but sort of like phrase analysis, and it's really important to understand, you know, your phrasing on songs, but it's for another, you know, it's for another lesson. But I mean, again, phrasing is basically understanding where the song is at a certain point in the song. You know, for me, I'm to the point now where I'm kind of playing songs from the beginning, truthfully. I might set a loop at the beginning of the song when I'm bringing it in, and then if I really like the song, I'll just play it all the way through the end. Now that being said, since I'm using 2 or 3 decks, I'm adding different energy into the song. You know, so I may be adding a third track in and swapping the bass. You know, I may be bringing all the tracks out. I may echo everything out and bring one track back in. But typically, if I like a song, I'm gonna play it from beginning to end. You know, but understanding that phrasing is very important. But again, if you set loops in the right place, if you're gonna use loops, then the phrasing kind of takes care of itself. If you're playing a track from beginning to end, you know, you just have to understand when the downbeat is, which is like the first beat, which is the first crash, or when the track starts, or when the drop happens. You know, that's gonna kind of be your downbeat. And if you understand that, then you'll know when to bring your next track in. You know, so that is a good point. Yep.
Well, in order to stay used correctly,
Yeah, I mean,
I think we should do that.
I agree with you, but again, that's for another class, I would say. You know, and
Like, note to self, like, do something one
yeah, for sure. Agreed. All right, so Anthony has a loop going here as well. So again, this is one of those breaks, you know, where it's, you know, and sometimes you have to use that empty space in a set to kind of throw people off guard. You know, we played last week. I think we started at 1:28 p.m. and ended at like 1:29 or 1:30. You're talking about 5 hours at the same BPM, right? So how can that possibly be? You know, really, it's about how you use different genres, and it's about how you control the energy level. You know, so it's about taking the energy out and bringing the energy back in, and doing things to make it interesting. Because if you play, you know, within a range of 5 BPM, you know, if you go to a rock concert, you hear all sorts of stuff. You know, there's a lot of like crowd engagement. With DJing, there's not as much of that. So you have to use your tracks kind of to do all of that for yourself. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Right. So pull down these two tracks. No, leave it there. This is a good example, right? So he set a loop, right? Because he doesn't know his track, right? He knows his track. He didn't necessarily know. So you see how he set a loop at the end because he didn't want the track to go out. But you see where he set the loop? Right, it's just this guy saying that you like over and over again, right? I mean, it's not his fault. He doesn't know his track, but you know, if this is your track and you set a loop there, unless you really plan on using that for like a tool, like that you like me, and then you like echo it out into like something else that you know wants to like it somebody, that can be kind of cool. But if you set a loop right there, you know, it's gonna annoy people. So this is an example of, you know, setting a loop and setting something to utilize the energy, but yeah, you don't hear people do this. You know, a lot of times if you find an advanced DJ do this, they'll set that loop and then after about 2 times they'll let it go. You know, like at this point this song is only 17 seconds stuff, we probably have to let the song die. You know, we can't certain tracks, it's about know your tracks. You know, if you know that there are words at the end of the track, you maybe can't set loop there. You might just have to let that track play out and bring in your other tracks, you know, just kind of let it go. No matter how you utilize hot cues, then you just go back. You know, it's a cheat code, basically. Yeah. All right. Cool. I love this track, by the way.
Pick a good one.
Yeah. Cool. That's kind of all I had. Does anybody have any other questions regarding like multiple deck mixing or?
Are you doing like coloring as you're hitting those high hats? Do you mean like respectful coming in at like 80%, 60%, or are you just throwing it up always? Are you trying to balance that kind of,
Yeah.
you know, in the energy with it? As you kind
That's a good question. So his question basically is bringing in the additional tracks. What level am I bringing them in? Am I just like smashing the track in, or you know, being gentle with it? And I guess quite honestly, it depends. You know, it depends. So if it's the beginning of it, typically I EQ it the way I want it, so I just bring it all the way in. You know,
you already had that level.
yeah, I've already decided what level I want the track to be in. The track coming in, I've kind of decided, you know, I want it to be quiet, I want to like be on full tilt, I want to just go ahead and swap the tracks. So usually I'm doing that. Also, you know, I think it's kind of fun sometimes to tease a track when you bring it in. So this is something I learned from one of my good buddies, Bill Namu. Bill uses space, which is an effect. It's a color effect. So it's on the left side of the controller or the mixer. And with the space effect, it'll do a splash like this. Right, so if you have a track playing, it'll kind of add a splash. You know, and then like, you know, once you're done with that, then you just bring the track in and just make sure that you don't have the effect on it. So I'll do things like that, or maybe have it filtered. So instead of bringing it, you know, I might bring it in full tilt, but I might have the bass and the mids cut, and then bring it in filtered. So, you know, it's not coming in with as much energy, and it's only letting the highs pass. So it's only letting, you know, the high end sound pass, because one thing you don't want is to bring in 2 tracks with 2 basses smashing at the same time. You know, if it's been on a small system like this, it'll just kind of sound like double bass. But on a larger system, you'll get like phasing, and that's when it'll sound like, you know, the club is fighting with itself. And it's just not a good look. So, you know, when you're gonna bring in, so again, So now I have another drum loop. Right, this is just a straight up drum loop. We played this track called Brazil. It was like a 6-minute track, but now, 35 seconds left, and we just got a drum loop going. So now if I want to bring in another track, it kind of just makes it easy for me to bring in something, whatever I want. Now, some tracks, again, this is about knowing your tracks. Some tracks have more we'll call it swing. So if the track has more swing to it, then even if you set a loop, even if it's mostly just drums, you might find that it really doesn't loop well. So a lot of it, tech house tracks or just sort of classic house tracks or techno tracks are good for looping. So things that are a little bit more funky, things that are a little bit more like even like some of the Latin techno stuff, depending on where you loop it, may not be that good for looping just because it has a little bit more swing to it. It may have like snare drums that kind of hit off beat. And if you have that happen too much, it's going to sound like you just have like some weird loop. So it's really about knowing which tracks to loop and which tracks just kind of like play out and just to cover. But like this right here, this is just a straight, four to the floor, just a straight loop that's easy to kind of mix with anything. It'll be a solid energy no matter what I bring in. So now if I bring in another track, just now, you can't even really tell that the track is still there. Again, because I have a filter on it, so I have the high pass on it, but it's just enough energy for me to know that if I have a break in the song, I'm not going to completely lose the crowd. I'm not going to feel like I lose the crowd. Some of it's psychological too. We feel that if we go into a break and it's weird and see people stop dancing, then we lost the crowd. Sometimes you need to give people a break. You can't have people just dancing on the floor for 5 hours straight. It gets monotonous. So it's okay to give people a little bit of a break and have a weird break and do some weird effects. You can do a lot of different things that way. Just to kind of like give yourself a little bit more nuance and not just banger after banger. It's good to like give people a break, but having those additional decks are there so that when it's time to have a drop, you not only have that the main drop of the track, but when it's gonna have a drop, and now I have that loop going. It's a little bit off beat, but it's gonna give my drop that additional energy. So, I think that's about it. Any other questions? That was a good question. Any other questions? Go ahead.
So you're running your XC through Rekordbox on the laptop to be able to connect the XDJ 1000?
So this thing is great in that it has a link built in.
Okay.
So right in the back of here, it's kind of hard to see, but there are actually 3 Cat5 inputs. So one is for channel 3, for channel 4, so 3, 4. Then there's an extension that you can, I don't even know what you use that. But basically you can just plug this directly in with the Cat5 cable.
Okay.
And you don't need a laptop,
Gotcha,
right?
okay.
So if you're just running, one of these controllers and you want to utilize 3 and 4, and you don't have additional like Pioneer players to connect, or like you can hook up turntables to this too. So it has a phono input. You can have like 2 turntables running with it, drum machines, whatever. But if you don't have any outboard gear with this, you would have to use the computer and use Rekordbox, and it's really cumbersome. It's not even really worth it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So a lot of people didn't really want to. 10 minutes. Okay. A lot of people, that was kind of one of the drawbacks of this, and like, oh well, Pioneer, they need a real standalone 4-channel, but I actually love it. I think it's good because if you don't have the additional gear, it's fine. Just use your 2 channels. But I really like being able to hook up these additional channels, and it just makes it very, especially for like a small collective. That way you don't have to have 5 pieces of gear that cost $2,000 each. You're talking about maybe $3,000, $4,000 versus $10,000. But yeah, as long as you have, and you can even, if a friend has an extra CDJ or something, being able to like have someone who has one of these and gets people together to practice on 3 decks, this makes it pretty easy. Now, if someone has like a proper mixer and they have additional decks, that definitely changes the game. But even then, you gotta have like Ethernet hub and connect everything, or you just gotta beat match everything. Now, I'm a big believer in beat matching. I think everybody should know how to play without sync. But if you're gonna be in a situation where you are performing and you're using 3 or 4 decks, unless you just really want a challenge, it's probably best to sync. And people feel different ways about using sync. Me personally, I use it when I play out because I'm playing on multiple decks and using lots of effects and have multiple things running. And so instead of me having to like try to prove that I know how to beat match, I'm just gonna try to have a good performance. But that being said, when I'm at home and I'm just practicing with 2 decks or even 3 decks, I will not play with sync, just to kind of test myself and to, stay on top of my game. Everyone has an opinion. Me personally, I think that do what's best for you. Definitely learn how to beat match. If you don't know how, and there's nothing wrong with not knowing how. I just think that everyone should know how to do it, because there will come a time where something crazy will happen. Maybe you get an emergency loop. If anybody's had that happen, the panic that comes with that.
What's an emergency loop?
Emergency loop is like when you're playing and I don't want to do it because I might mess up my USB, but when you're playing and something might happen, the USB like it's kind of messed up or it comes out or something happens, and the gear will just go into a loop and you can't stop it. You basically have to load up on another channel and then you got to turn it off or you got to do something. Like you can't stop it. But it's an emergency loop so that the music just doesn't stop. So if something does happen where the USB like somehow gets knocked out of socket and it won't read it, it just sets a loop at like the closest point so that you can quickly load up another song and you can just switch it out real quick. So if that something like, and a lot of times when it sets an emergency loop, it doesn't set it in a quantized manner, meaning it'll set it and like cut it short. So it'll just sound like a record skipping, knowing how to beat match can help, not just like proving that you know how to beat match. The real reason it'll help is when shit hits the fan and you need to kind of, figure out how to get out of a bad situation. Maybe you're taking over for somebody else who was playing and they weren't, they didn't have the deck set up the way that you wanted, and something you're like, man, I just got to beat match just to get this first track in here and to get my set going, But, again, if you're going to be playing with multiple decks, it's probably best to sync. Now, that being said, back in the day when they didn't have sync and they just had records or they were playing on, the first CDJs, they were doing it without it. So it's definitely possible. And, if you want to do that, then by all means, go ahead. It's just for me personally. I'm going to use sync if I'm using multiple decks just because, I'm trying to make my life easier, not harder. Yeah. Anything else?
So, for example, if you want to record, you record from the mixer
Mm-hmm.
to the device,
Mm-hmm.
and the third CDJ gets connected to the mixer too.
Mm-hmm.
So all of it gets recorded.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of it's just like with a line mixer. The beauty with mixers, which is, I think mixers are amazing. Just regular line mixers like one of these or DJ mixers. You put everything into the input and you got one master output. Now, a lot of mixers will have multiple outputs and they'll have like sort of send outputs. But yeah, with this device, you put, the third, fourth CDJ in here, you can put something in the aux, even the mic. Everything you put in will get recorded out the master, which is a really nice thing. So then that way you don't have to worry about, any sort of separate setup that you need. Now, as it gets more advanced, you do have mixers that have separate outputs and then they have what are called send and returns. And so, with that, you can kind of send the sound to somewhere else. And if you're doing that, a lot of times that won't be recorded. But again, that's kind of next level if you're using like effects pedals and other devices to kind of add additional things to your set. Any last questions? I think we have time for one more, or we'll just get the performance question. Yeah, we're good. Yeah,
Yeah,
we're good. All right.
Can we move the chairs out so we can put a picture?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you guys.
But yeah, come back so we can do it.
How you doing? Good, man. In a great way. Yeah, that was cool. And I was like, oh, right for camera. Oh, yeah, you did no, that's perfect right It worked well.